The Valorian science vessel Kindred Light was dying. Its hull had been torn open in 3 places, and the cold vacuum of space was slowly creeping into the lower decks. Emergency lights flickered red across the corridors, where bodies of crew members lay still. Victims of the attack that had come without warning just 6 hours ago. Captain Xyleth pressed 4 trembling hands against the command console and watched the life support readings fall. The Valorians were a gentle species, their bodies thin and fragile, with translucent skin that showed the pale blue of their blood beneath. They had evolved on a world of soft winds and warm seas, a paradise compared to most planets in the galaxy. They were scientists and artists, not warriors. They had never learned to fight. The Cathari raiders had known this. They had appeared from nowhere, 3 warships surrounding the Kindred Light like predators circling wounded prey. They had demanded the cargo, the rare minerals the Valorians were transporting for medical research. When Xyleth had tried to negotiate, they had simply opened fire. Now the raiders were gone, satisfied with their stolen goods and leaving the crippled ship to drift into the endless dark of the Andara Nebula. 47 crew members remained alive out of 112. The oxygen would last maybe 2 more days. The nearest Valorian outpost was 6 days away at emergency speed, and the engines were barely functional. Xyleth looked at the communication officer, a young female named Tellen, whose arm hung broken at her side. She had refused treatment, insisting others needed the medical supplies more. Her loyalty made the captain's hearts ache with sorrow. There was only one option left: the emergency beacon. It would broadcast on all frequencies, reaching across the stars to anyone who might hear. But anyone meant everyone. It meant species the Galactic Council had warned them about. It meant the possibility of something worse than the Cathari finding them. Tellen seemed to read the captain's thoughts. She spoke softly, saying that they had no choice. Death was certain if they stayed silent. At least the beacon offered a chance. Xyleth closed all 4 eyes and activated the beacon. The signal pulsed outward into the void, carrying coordinates and a simple message in the universal language of distress. "Help us. We are dying. 3 days passed like 3 years." The oxygen grew thin. The wounded grew weaker. Xyleth spent hours standing at the viewport, watching the stars and waiting for something to appear. Part of the captain hoped nothing would come. A quick death from suffocation seemed preferable to what some species might do to them. On the morning of the 4th day, Tellen's voice broke the silence. Her tone was strange, caught between relief and terror. A ship had appeared on the sensors. It was not Valorian. It was not Cathari. The signature matched a species that made the raiders look like children playing with toys. Humans. The ship was human. Xyleth felt the blood drain from beneath translucent skin. Every child in the galaxy knew the stories about humans. Their home world, Earth, was classified as a Category 12 death world, the highest and most dangerous rating the Council had ever given. It was a planet of crushing gravity, extreme temperatures, deadly radiation, and predators that killed not just for food but for sport. The beings that evolved there were nightmares given flesh. Humans could survive injuries that would kill any other species. They could function without sleep for days. They consumed poisons for pleasure, substances like caffeine and alcohol that would stop a Valorian heart instantly. They had conquered their death world not through adaptation, but through sheer stubborn refusal to die. And when they finally reached the stars, the galaxy had collectively decided to keep its distance. The human ship grew larger on the sensors. It was not elegant like Valorian vessels, all smooth curves and gentle lines. This ship was blocky and armored, covered in scars from countless battles. It looked like a weapon given form. The designation on its hull read U.S. Valor. A communication request came through. Xyleth hesitated, then accepted. A human face appeared on the screen, and the captain had to force down a wave of primal fear. The human had brown skin and dark eyes that seemed to look straight through the viewer. Its jaw was square and strong, and a thin scar ran across its left cheek. When it spoke, its voice was deep and calm. The human identified itself as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Valor. It said they had received the distress signal and were responding. It asked about the status of the crew and the nature of the emergency. Xyleth could barely speak. The captain managed to explain the attack, the casualties, the failing life support. The human listened without interruption, its expression never changing. When Xyleth finished, the human simply nodded and said they were coming aboard. The airlock connection took 10 minutes. Xyleth gathered the remaining crew in the main corridor, not knowing whether to prepare for rescue or execution. The story said humans enjoyed violence. The story said they kept trophies from their kills. The story said they feared nothing and showed mercy to no one. The airlock opened with a hiss. 4 humans stepped through, and the Valorian crew pressed back against the walls in terror. The humans were tall and broad, their bodies thick with muscle built to survive Earth's crushing gravity. They wore simple uniforms and carried equipment bags. Their movements were smooth and confident, like predators who knew they had nothing to fear. But then something unexpected happened. The human at the front, a female with black hair pulled back tight, knelt beside a wounded Valorian child and smiled. Her voice was soft and gentle as she introduced herself as Dr. Amy Nguyen. She said she was a healer and asked permission to help. Behind her, another human was already pulling medical supplies from a bag. A third moved toward the damaged life support systems with repair tools. The fourth, Jake Morrison himself, approached Xyleth with slow and careful steps, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. He told the captain that they were going to fix the ship. He told the captain that they were going to treat the wounded. He told the captain that everything was going to be okay. Xyleth stared at the human in confusion. This was not how the stories went. These were supposed to be monsters. These were supposed to be the most dangerous beings in the known galaxy. But the female human was now humming softly to the wounded child while she cleaned its injuries. The engineer was explaining the repairs to a nervous Valorian technician, and Jake Morrison was offering the captain a small container of water. His terrifying face somehow, managing to look kind, thought the captain took the water with trembling hands and finally found the courage to ask a question. Why were they helping? What did they want in return? Jake Morrison looked surprised by the question. He said they wanted nothing. He said they had received a call for help, and so they had come to help. That was all. That was everything. Xyleth did not understand. But as the humans spread through the ship, bringing medicine and tools and warm blankets for the cold survivors, the captain began to wonder if perhaps the galaxy had made a terrible mistake about these strange and frightening creatures. The repairs took 18 hours. In that time, Xyleth watched the humans work with a mixture of fascination and lingering fear. They did not rest. They did not complain. They simply moved from task to task with a focus that seemed almost mechanical, yet somehow warm. Dr. Amy Nguyen had turned the cargo bay into a medical station. She treated burns and broken bones and internal injuries with hands that never shook. When a young Valorian male died despite her efforts, she closed his eyes gently and sat with his body for several minutes in silence. Xyleth had expected humans to be indifferent to death. Instead, Amy wiped tears from her face before moving to the next patient. The engineer, a large male named Kevin Marsh, had managed to restore life support to full function. He worked alongside Valorian technicians who were initially too terrified to speak to him. By the end, they were laughing at his strange jokes and asking questions about human technology. Kevin had a loud voice and an easy smile that seemed impossible on a creature so physically intimidating. Communications officer Danny Reyes spent hours helping Talon repair the damaged communication systems. He was younger than the others, with quick hands and a nervous energy that reminded Xylith of a Valorian adolescent. When Talon thanked him for his help, he blushed red beneath his brown skin and said it was nothing. And then there was Jake Morrison. The lieutenant commander moved through the ship like a watchful guardian, checking on every repair and every patient. He spoke little but noticed everything. When a Valorian child started crying from pain, Jake sat beside it and told a quiet story about a dog he had owned on Earth. The child did not understand most of the words, but the gentle tone calmed it enough for Amy to finish treating its wounds. Xylith found the courage to approach Jake near the end of the repairs. The captain asked why the humans were doing all this. The Valorians had nothing to offer in return. They were not allies of Earth. They were strangers who had sent a desperate signal into the void. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Xylith would never forget. He said that on Earth, there was an old tradition. When someone was lost or hurt or in danger, you helped them. You did not ask what they could give you. You did not calculate the benefit to yourself. You simply helped because they needed help, and you were able to give it. That was what it meant to be human. The captain did not fully understand, but before there was time to ask more questions, everything changed. Alarms screamed across both ships. Danny Reyes shouted from the communication station that 3 vessels had just dropped out of hyperspace. The energy signatures were familiar. The Cathari raiders had returned. Xylith felt a cold wave of despair crash through both hearts. The kindred light was still crippled. It could not run. It could not fight. The humans had 1 small ship against 3 warships crewed by professional killers. This was the end done, but Jake Morrison did not look afraid. His expression shifted into something hard and focused, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. He touched the communicator on his wrist and spoke 3 words to his ship. Battle stations. Now, the humans moved instantly. Amy secured the medical bay. Kevin grabbed his tools and ran for the airlock. Danny stayed at the communication station, his fingers flying across the controls. Jake turned to Xylith and told the captain to keep everyone calm. He told the captain to stay away from the outer hull. He told the captain that the Valor would handle this. Within minutes, Jake was back on his own bridge. Xylith watched through the viewport as the blocky human ship positioned itself between the kindred light and the approaching raiders. It looked so small against the 3 Cathari warships, like a single stone standing against a flood. A communication channel opened. The face that appeared was Cathari, a brutal creature with gray scales and yellow eyes filled with cruel amusement. It identified itself as Commander Varric. It demanded that the humans surrender immediately. The Valorians were Cathari property, it claimed. The humans were trespassing in Cathari territory. Resistance would result in death. Jake's response came through the channel, and Xylith heard it clearly. The human's voice was calm, almost bored. He said that the Valorians were now under human protection. He suggested that Varric take his ships and leave while he still could. He said this was not a threat. It was a professional courtesy. Varric laughed. The sound was harsh and mocking. His species had conquered dozens of worlds. His ships had destroyed hundreds of vessels. What could 1 small human ship do against 3 Cathari warships? The question was asked with absolute confidence. The answer came 30 seconds later. The Valor moved. Not flew, not drifted, but moved with a speed and precision that seemed to break the laws of physics. Pilot Chris Yamada threw the ship into maneuvers that would have killed most alien species from the Force alone. The Valor spun and dove and climbed while its weapons officer, Megan Cole, worked the targeting systems with cold mechanical efficiency. The first missile struck the Lid Raider's engines before Vorak could even give an order. The explosion was precise, disabling the ship without destroying it. The second missile hit moments later, taking out the weapons array. In 40 seconds, the most powerful Cathari warship was drifting helpless in space. The two remaining raiders opened fire. Energy beams streaked across the void, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But the Valor was never where the beams expected it to be. Chris Yamada flew like he could see the future, dodging attacks by margins so thin they should have been impossible. Megan Cole returned fire with patient precision. She did not waste ammunition. Every shot had a purpose. The second raider lost its engines. The third lost its weapons. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it was over, 2 Cathari ships were fleeing into hyperspace at maximum speed. The third drifted dead beside its disabled companion, both crews frantically broadcasting surrender signals. On the Kindred Light, Xylith stood frozen at the viewport. The captain had just witnessed something that would haunt Valorian dreams for generations. The humans had not fought with rage or bloodlust. There had been no screaming, no chaos, no wild aggression. They had fought with patience, precision, and a terrifying competence that suggested this was simply routine for them. They had treated combat like a task to be completed, nothing more. The communication channel crackled. Jake Morrison's face appeared again. There was a small cut on his lip from where he had been thrown against the console during one of the sharper maneuvers. He did not seem to notice it. He asked if everyone on the Kindred Light was okay. He asked if anyone needed medical attention. Xylith could only stare. The captain finally understood why the galaxy feared humans. It was not because they were violent. It was not because they were cruel. It was because they were so impossibly, terrifyingly good at violence when they chose to use it. And yet here was Jake Morrison, fresh from destroying a raider fleet, asking if anyone needed help with the same casual concern as before. The captain whispered a single word, monster, but it was not an insult. It was a revelation. These humans were monsters who had chosen to be gentle, and that made them the most dangerous and the most wonderful beings Xylith had ever met. The Valor escorted the Kindred Light through the Andorra Nebula at careful speed. The Valorian ship was stable now, its systems repaired enough for the journey to the nearest safe port. But the trip would take 4 days, and in that time, Xylith found it impossible to rest. The captain spent hours standing at the viewport, watching the human ship fly alongside. It moved with quiet confidence through the starfield, scarred and battered but unbroken. Just like the humans themselves, the battle footage had spread through the surviving crew. Everyone had watched it again and again, trying to understand what they had witnessed. The Cathari were feared across dozens systems. Their raiders had destroyed countless ships and enslaved entire colonies. And the humans had dismantled them in 7 minutes like they were swatting insects. Yet those same humans now walked peacefully through the Kindred Light, checking on patients and sharing meals with the crew. Kevin Marsh had taught a group of young Valorians an Earth game called Cards. Danny Reyes was helping Talon recalibrate the communication array. Amy Nguyen had not left the medical bay except to sleep, and even then only for a few hours at a time. Xylith needed to understand. The captain requested a private meeting with Jake Morrison, and the human agreed without hesitation. They met in the small observation lounge at the front of the Kindred Light. The nebula spread before them like a painting, clouds of purple and gold gas drifting through the eternal dark. Jake stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed but alert. He looked tired, Xylith noticed. There were shadows beneath his eyes that had not been there before. The captain began with a simple question. What were humans, really? Every species in the galaxy avoided them. The Council had classified Earth as the most dangerous world ever discovered. How could such monsters show such kindness to strangers? who had nothing to offer. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned from the viewport and sat down across from Xylith. He said he would try to explain, but he warned that it might not make sense. Human nature was complicated. Even humans did not fully understand it. He told Xylith about Earth. Yes, it was harsh. The gravity was crushing by galactic standards. The temperature swung between extremes that would kill most species. The planet was covered with predators, parasites, and diseases that had spent millions of years learning to destroy life. Humans had evolved in this nightmare, fighting for survival every single day. But that struggle had done something strange to them. It had taught them to work together. A single human was weak compared to the predators of Earth, but a group of humans could bring down any beast. They learned to cooperate, to communicate, to trust each other, even when trust was dangerous. They learned that survival was not about individual strength. It was about the bonds between them. Jake paused and looked at his hands. He said the same. Instincts that made humans dangerous also made them protective. When humans formed bonds, they would die to defend them. When they saw weakness or suffering, something deep inside them demanded they respond. It was not logical. It was not calculated. It was simply part of what they were. Xylith listened in silence. The captain asked about human history. Were there not wars? Were there not atrocities? The records said humans had spent most of their existence killing each other. Jake nodded slowly. He did not try to hide it. He said human history was filled with horror. Humans had committed terrible acts against their own kind. They had invented weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had built systems of cruelty and oppression that lasted centuries. They were capable of evil beyond anything the galaxy could imagine. But they were also capable of the opposite. Jake spoke of firefighters running into burning buildings to save strangers. He spoke of soldiers carrying wounded enemies to safety. He spoke of doctors traveling to plague zones, knowing they might die. He spoke of ordinary people giving their last food to hungry children they had never met. Humans were not good or evil, Jake said. They were both. They contained multitudes. Every human was a battlefield between their worst impulses and their best ones. And most of them, most of the time, chose to be better than they had to be. The door opened softly. Amy Nguyen entered carrying 2 cups of something warm. She apologized for interrupting, but said she thought they might need this. She called it tea, an Earth custom meant to provide comfort. She handed 1 cup to Xylith and 1 to Jake, then sat down beside them. Xylith held the cup carefully. The warmth spread through fragile fingers and somehow made the captain feel safer. The captain asked Amy the same question. How could humans be so dangerous and so kind at the same time? Amy smiled sadly. She said that humans feared their own capacity for violence. They knew what they could become if they let themselves. That fear made them careful. It made them build rules and systems and codes to keep their worst impulses in check. Every human grew up learning that power without control was destruction. They were taught to be gentle, precisely because they knew how much damage they could do. Jake added something quietly. He said humans had a saying on Earth, with great power came great responsibility. It sounded simple, but it was the foundation of human ethics. The strong had a duty to protect the weak. Those who could cause harm had an obligation to prevent it instead. Xylith looked between the 2 humans, these strange and terrifying and wonderful creatures. The captain finally understood something important. The galaxy had not misunderstood humans. The galaxy had only seen half of them. It had seen the danger and missed the compassion. It had seen the predator and missed the protector. Humans were not monsters. They were something far more complex. They were predators who had learned to love. They were killers who had chosen to heal. They were the most dangerous beings in the known universe, and they had decided to use that danger to shield others from harm. The captain set down the teacup and spoke slowly. Xylith said the Valorians owed the humans a great debt. The captain asked how it could ever be repaid. Jake shook his head. He said there was no debt. He said helping others was its own reward. He said that if the Valorians wanted to honor what the humans had done, they could simply do the same for someone else someday. They could pass the kindness forward. Amy reached out and touched Xylith's arm gently. She said that was what humans believed. The universe was cold and dark and full of danger. But every act of compassion made it a little warmer. Every life saved was a victory against the void. Humans did not help others because they expected something in return. They helped because helping was what made existence worthwhile. Xylith felt something shift deep inside. The fear that had gripped the captain since the distress signal was finally fading. In its place was something new. It was hope. It was the beginning of understanding. It was the first step toward a friendship that would change everything. The three of them sat together in the observation lounge, watching the nebula drift past, sharing warmth in the cold of space. And for the first time since the attack, Xylith believed that perhaps the universe was not as cruel as it seemed. Perhaps there was light in the darkness after all. Perhaps the humans had brought it with them. The story spread like fire across the galactic networks. Within days, every inhabited world had heard some version of what happened in the Andara Nebula. A human ship had answered a Valorian distress call. It had repaired the damaged vessel and treated the wounded crew. When Kethari raiders returned to claim their victims, the single human ship had defeated 3 warships in 7 minutes without killing a single enemy combatant. The footage was everywhere. Billions of beings across hundreds of species watched the battle again and again. They watched the Valor move like nothing they had ever seen. They watched the precise missile strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. They watched Commander Vorik flee in terror from a ship 1/10 the size of his own. But more than the battle, they watched what came after. They watched Jake Morrison return to the kindred light with a split lip and a casual shrug. They watched Amy Nguyen continue treating Valorian patients as if nothing had happened. They watched humans share food and jokes and comfort with aliens they had just met. The Galactic Council could not ignore this. For 300 years, they had maintained strict quarantine protocols around Earth and human space. Humans were classified as too dangerous for regular contact. Trade was limited. Diplomatic relations were minimal. The official position was that humanity needed to be contained for the safety of all other species. But now, voices of dissent were rising among the member worlds. The Valorian government formally requested a review of human classification. 17 other species seconded the motion. The council had no choice but to convene an emergency session. The great chamber on the station, called Nexus Prime, filled with delegates from across the galaxy. There were beings of every shape and size imaginable. Insectoid cricks clicked their mandibles nervously. Gaseous velas swirled in containment fields. Aquatic marine floated in mobile tanks of water. And at the center of the vast room, on a raised platform reserved for those addressing the assembly, stood a single human woman. Ambassador Lauren Price was not what most species expected from a human. She was small by their standards, barely reaching the chest of the Valorian delegate beside her. Her hair was gray at the temples, and her face showed lines of age. She wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations except a small Earth flag on her shoulder. But her eyes were sharp and steady, and when she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber with absolute clarity. She thanked the council for the opportunity to address them. She acknowledged that humans had a complicated reputation. She said she would not apologize for human nature because there was nothing to apologize for. The Kethari delegate rose immediately, demanding recognition. Its name was Torvax, a younger relative of Commander Vorak, who had been sent to represent their interests. It pointed one clawed finger at Lauren and accused humans of unprovoked aggression. Cathari vessels had been attacked. Cathari crew members had been injured. This was an act of war. Lauren waited until Torvax finished. Then she turned to face the Cathari directly. Her voice remained calm as she presented the facts. Cathari. Raiders had attacked an unarmed Valorian science vessel without provocation. They had killed 65 crew members. They had stolen medical supplies intended for a colony suffering from plague. They had left survivors to die in the cold of space. She presented evidence, images and recordings recovered from the kindred light. The chamber fell silent as they watched Cathari weapons tear through the Valorian hull. They heard the screams of the dying. They saw the raiders laughing as they loaded stolen cargo onto their ships. Lauren continued in the same steady voice. She said that humans had received a distress call and responded. They had provided aid to the survivors. When the raiders returned to finish their work, the humans had defended the innocent. They had disabled the attacking ships without destroying them. They had captured crews without executing them. They had shown restraint when they could have chosen annihilation. She asked the council a simple question. What would the Cathari have done if the situations were reversed? Torvax had no answer. The Cathari delegate sank back into its seat, yellow eyes burning with hatred, but unable to speak. Another delegate rose, an elderly Marine whose tank hummed softly. It asked Ambassador Price to explain human motivations. The galaxy knew humans were capable of terrible violence. What guarantee was there that they would not turn that violence against peaceful species? Lauren nodded respectfully. She said there were no guarantees. Humans were not perfect. Their history contained darkness that would horrify any being who studied it. But that same history contained something else. It contained constant effort to be better. She presented evidence that stretched back centuries. Human disaster relief missions on alien worlds. Medical aid sent to species who had never asked for help. Human ships responding to distress calls, regardless of who sent them. A pattern of behavior that showed humanity reaching out with open hands instead of closed fists. She told the council that humans had spent their entire existence fighting themselves. They knew the cost of war better than any species in the galaxy. That knowledge had changed them. It had made them desperate for peace, hungry for connection, determined to prove that strength did not have to mean cruelty. Lauren paused and looked around the chamber. She said she was not asking the council to trust humans blindly. Trust had to be earned, but she was asking for a chance. She was asking for the quarantine to end. She was asking for real diplomatic relations, real trade, real cooperation. She said humans had so much to offer. Medical technology that could save millions of lives. Engineering knowledge that could transform struggling colonies. And more than anything, they had the will to help. They wanted to be part of the galactic community. They wanted to contribute, to protect, to serve. Torvax rose again, voice sharp with contempt. The Cathari demanded to know what punishment the humans would face for attacking their vessels. The raiders were operating legally in Cathari space. The humans had no right to interfere. Lauren turned to face Torvax one final time. Her voice lost its diplomatic smoothness and became something colder. She reminded the delegate that the humans had shown restraint. They had disabled ships when they could have destroyed them. They had captured crews when they could have killed them. She suggested that if the Cathari wanted to test human patience further, they were welcome to try. But she warned that next time, there might not be survivors to file complaints. The chamber went absolutely silent. Every delegate understood the message beneath her words. Humans could have done far worse. They had chosen mercy. That choice could be reconsidered. The vote took 3 hours. When it was finished, the results appeared on every screen in the chamber. By a margin of 73%, the Galactic Council voted to end the quarantine of human space. Full diplomatic relations would begin immediately. Humanity was no longer contained. Lauren Price walked out of the chamber with her head held high. Behind her, the galaxy was changing forever. And somewhere in the Andara Nebula, the crew of the U.S. Valor received the news with quiet satisfaction. Jake Morrison read the announcement and simply nodded. Then he asked if there were any other distress signals that needed answering. There were always more people who needed help. And now, finally, humans would be allowed to provide it. 6 months had changed everything. The galaxy that had once feared humans was now learning to understand them. And understanding was slowly transforming into something that looked almost like trust. The U.S. Valor returned to the Andara Nebula as part of the first joint patrol in galactic history. 2 Valorian cruisers flew in formation alongside the human vessel, their elegant hulls gleaming silver against the purple clouds of gas. A council observer ship followed at a respectful distance, recording everything for the historical archives. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the stars with an expression of quiet satisfaction. His crew had grown since the incident with the Kindred Light. There were new faces at several stations, including one that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Kiris was a young Valorian officer, one of the first to complete the new exchange program between human and alien militaries. The young alien stood at the observation post, 4 slender arms clasped behind a thin back in imitation of human military posture. Kiris had been aboard the Valor for 3 months now, learning human tactics and culture and trying desperately to understand these strange beings who had saved so many lives. The young officer approached Jake hesitantly. There was a question that had been bothering Kiris for weeks, and the courage to ask it had finally arrived. Kiris asked if humans were ever afraid. They seemed so confident in everything they did. They walked into danger without hesitation. They faced impossible odds with calm determination. Did fear simply not exist for them? Jake laughed softly. It was a warm sound, nothing like the harsh barks of aggression that Kiris had expected from humans before serving among them. He admitted that humans were afraid all the time. Fear was constant. It was a companion that walked beside them through every moment of their lives. But somewhere in their evolution, he explained, humans had learned to act despite fear. They had discovered that courage was not the absence of terror. It was the choice to move forward anyway. Every human who had ever done anything brave had been terrified while doing it. The fear did not stop them. They simply refused to let it win. Kiris considered this carefully. The young Valorian asked what happened when the fear became too strong. What happened when humans faced something so terrible that even they could not push through? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Kiris would remember for the rest of a long life. He said that when fear became overwhelming, humans reached for each other. They held on to the people beside them. They remembered that they were not alone. The bonds between humans were stronger than any terror the universe could produce. As long as they stood together, they could face anything. The bridge communication console beeped softly. Danny Reyes, still serving as communications officer, looked up with sudden tension in his young face. He announced that they were receiving a distress signal from the Korvax Mayan colony. Unknown hostiles were attacking the station. Casualties were mounting. They were requesting immediate assistance. Jake did not hesitate. He ordered the ship to maximum speed and alerted the Valorian cruisers through the Joint Command Channel. Within seconds, all 3 vessels had changed course and were accelerating toward the colony. Kiris watched the humans move. There was no panic, no confusion, no wasted motion. Every crew member knew exactly what to do. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. They had spent their entire lives becoming ready for moments exactly like this one. Amy Nguyen emerged from the medical bay, already wearing her trauma gear. Kevin Marsh was in engineering, pushing the engines beyond their rated capacity. Megan Cole sat at the weapons console with her fingers poised and ready. Chris Yamada gripped the flight controls with quiet intensity, and Jake Morrison stood at the center of it all, calm and focused. The eye of a hurricane that was about to descend on whoever had been foolish enough to attack innocent people. The jump to hyperspace took 47 minutes. When they emerged, the Korvax colony was burning. Pirate vessels circled the station like sharks around wounded prey, their weapons tearing chunks from the habitat domes. Escape pods drifted helplessly, too small to attract the pirates, but too fragile to survive long in the void. Jake opened a channel to the attacking ships. His voice was hard as stone. He identified himself and ordered them to cease fire immediately. He said they had 30 seconds to power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance would not be tolerated. The pirate commander responded with laughter and obscenities. There were 8 of them, the voice taunted. What could 3 ships do against 8? Jake closed the channel. He looked at his crew and gave a single order. Show them. The battle lasted 12 minutes. The Valor moved through the pirate formation like death itself, precise and unstoppable. The Valorian cruisers provided support, their crews fighting with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. Something about serving alongside humans had awakened the fire in them that they had not known existed. When it was over, 5 pirate ships had been destroyed and 3 had surrendered. The Korvax colony was secured. Search and rescue operations began immediately. Human and Valorian crews working side by side to pull survivors from the wreckage. Kiris worked alongside Amy in the emergency medical station, treating victims of species the young Valorian had never encountered before. The work was exhausting and heartbreaking. Not everyone could be saved, but for every life lost, 3 more were pulled back from the edge of death dawn as the night cycle approached. Kiris stood at the viewport and watched the rescue operations continue. The young officer felt something unexpected. It was not fear, though that emotion was certainly present. It was not exhaustion, though that too weighed heavily. It was something else entirely. It was safety. For the first time in a life spent fearing the unknown, Kiris understood what it meant to have humans as allies. They were not perfect. They were not gentle. But they were loyal beyond measure, and they would never, ever abandon those who trusted them. Jake appeared beside the young officer, his uniform stained with smoke and other things Kiris preferred not to identify. He looked as tired as anyone could look, but his eyes were still alert, still watching, still protecting. KY Ars asked him a final question. What came next? What would humans do now that they were part of the galactic community? Jake looked out at the stars, at the ruined colony, at the ships of 3 different species working together to save lives. He said humans would do what they had always done. They would help. They would protect. They would stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. They would make mistakes and learn from them. They would fail sometimes and succeed others. But most importantly, they would never stop trying to make the universe a little less cruel. That was their purpose. That was their promise. That was what it meant to be human. Kiris stood beside the human commander and felt hope bloom like a new star in the darkness. The galaxy would never be the same. But watching these strange, terrifying, wonderful beings work, the young Valorian suspected that change might not be something to fear after all. Perhaps it was something to celebrate. Perhaps the final distress call had not summoned monsters from the void. Perhaps it had summoned exactly what the galaxy needed: guardians, protectors, friends, humans.